Welcome back. We're looking forward, B'ez Hashem, as to move on with this Igeres Chof. And I say move on because this is, I believe, the 13th, 12th, I believe it's even the 13th class on this Igeres Chof. So we spoke about it so much. We did pledge that before every class on this very segment, we're going to point out this is not a regular chapter, in this case, Igeres epistle. It's not regular. It's distinct than any other chapter in the entire Tanya. We did mention there's one similar in Transcendent, which is the last of the 5 segments. Tanya, again, we do repeat this, has 5 segments. It does correspond to, this is the Teres Shebiksav of Teres Achsidis. The final segment is Transcendent. There is a similar presentation there. But that's it. There's nothing like it in the entire Tanya. So Tanya is, of course, one has to, in Yiddish should be zugetrogen. One has to pay attention and try to decipher everything the Alter Rebbe says. But in the end of the day, in comparison to this Igeres, it's easy, even if you will. Nothing is easy. In Kolateru Kol Yogaito Umatzosotam, one says toil, then they find. And when they find much more than commensurate to what they toiled. That's why it says umot sosa. It doesn't say v'hisakto, famously said. So there's always, you learn Tanya, you learn any matter in Torah, but talking about Tanya, any Pedic, of course there has to be Yigiyah, just zugetrogenkeit, meaning to say attention paid, but then it flows and you get it, and it's exciting actually for that matter. And on top of that, Tanya is namely to give us direction, how to live as Frume Yidden, how to live as a Jew which has a mandate, or for that matter, even as a human being, particularly the Yid, which has a mandate. Anini Vresi L'Shamash Eskeni. I was created to serve my master, so we have to have the tools, we have to have the manual. What does Hashem want from us? So we know we have a Shulchan Aruch, but we know that the entire day, it's not just an overall checklist. The day breaks itself into hours, minutes, seconds, milliseconds. That's really one can identify their commitment, their loyalty to the word of Hashem, especially when it comes to the subtle koiches, the v'riyah, shmiya, audio, vision, thought. Every millisecond makes a difference. So there's so much, and how do we compete with the challenges which are faced in every generation? There's different challenges which that generation has in this generation. For that matter, the entire Torah, we need more and more the perfect manual in order for us to come clean towards the end of the day and say, hey, rather Hashem, in the prayer, Hashem biyotcha, rather afkid ruchi podisa oisi, Hashem kelemes, I'm giving you back neshama. What does that neshama look like in the end of the day? Is it clean? Is it pure? Are we okay to hand over that neshama back to Hashem? And of course, beseech Him that the next day He should trust us again. Rabba emunasecha, of course, it comes together with our trusting and knowing that we have the ability to do things right. We need a lot of kaiches for that, and namely, we need a manual. We need a healthy manual, which this is the reason why all these Sifrei Musar, which were written by Gdei Yisrael to allow the Yid. They knew that the Yid has a Shulchan Aruch, and he or she knows basically what to do. But there's so much which goes on in the lifetime of a person that we need guidance, we need help, we need energy and information how to navigate the life again for which it was given to us for, which is l'shamash eskain, to serve our master. So of course through learning Torah and doing mitzvahs, but we need the guide, we need a manual, and Tanya is the manual. I mentioned many times, I'm not here to promote a sefer which is aligned with the Chassidus that I am so meritorious to belong to, as an understatement. No, one has to learn Tanya and learn it thoroughly, a total different light, qualitatively distinct in every possible manner. And one is hands-on on learning on Torah, on Yiras Shamayim, on mitzvahs, how to navigate the challenges we have, how to go about them, what does Torah has to say about them. And the Rebbe went into the psyche of the human being, and he hit it off every single detail of the humanness, so to say, of the human being, and came through the prism of the directions of Torah. How do we fuse them together? How do I step up to the plate as a human being with my human proclivities and animalistic? We have an Nefesh Bahamis. Even they identify the Nefesh Bahamis so carefully, which again, Yedias Hamachla Chatzi Harufua, the famous expression, knowing half the sickness, or rather knowing one's illness is half the cure. Al describes what Nefesh Bahamis is. Even the term Nefesh Bahamis, the animal soul, we know about Yetzer Hara, but Al Rebbe wrote this term careful. Of course, he mentions periodically Yetzer Hara, but Yetzer Hara, you see right away, Ra, bad, evil. Animal soul, an animal is not necessarily evil. Particularly, you're talking about an animal, of course, it can go south, as they say, tantalize, you taunt a animal. It might come gore you. Again, the animals which gore at you, but but by default they don't gore. They're just whatever contributes to its comfort. That's what the animal does. If it's a cow, it's a sheep, a goat. They're not particularly out there. A goat doesn't by default gore. It's just you tickle its fancy, if you will, and get it upset. Perhaps then it would start goring. But an animal is whatever contributes to its comfort. That's what it does. And stay away. Don't mix in. Meaning to say, don't tell me about other things. I need to be 100% comfortable. Here it scratches itself. Here it eats, and here it goes to sleep. We have that Nefesh Bahamis within us. So once we identify, again, this is a brilliant, we always mention whenever it's become brilliant associated with Tanya, we step back because this is the Dvar Hashem, Gilos Dvari Aidei Seidis, Gilos Seidei Aidei Avodah Vanavim. Hashem revealed this to His servants, the Nevi'im, the Alter Rebbe, particularly the Alter Rebbe as a Neshama Chadasha, which came to prepare the world with the Teres of Baal Shem Tov, the spark, the light of the Baal Shem Tov, to introduce to the world through his Torah, the Tanya, and then Chassidus Chabad in general, which Alter Rebbe himself wrote tens of Sfarim on the Chabad philosophy. This would be the Torah Shebiksav of all Torahs of Chassidus, then the subsequent Rabbeim, all the 7 Rabbeim, ushering in this optimal life of living associated and aligned with Yemesa Mashiach. Again, we spoke about this so many times. So this is the Tanya. It's the perfect manual to Avodas Hashem. You got to try it. You got to learn a lot of Tanya. And you see, it says by the Navi, become a different person. I don't mean to say you become a Navi. It depends how much Tanya you're learning, how much you identify, how much you apply Tanya. Yeah, you become a Yiddish also a hecher, a higher, a exalted type of, but not removed, but exalted in your appreciation of your mandate. Alei Adam is to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The sensitivity to the divine becomes so much more real, of course, when you learn and you apply Tanya. But the idea is that there is something learning and applying even minimally. It's a different experience. Yet when it comes to Geras HaKodesh, someone's going to start, okay, I heard so much about Tanya, and I really want to serve Hashem with joy, and uvgeleptkeit, uvgelegt, to be, content and joyfully serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu, soldiering forward in my Avodas Hashem. And I was told so much about Tanya, and I opened up Geras HaKodesh. That's the reason why. We pledge before every one of this particular chapter, because it's so distinct and it has so much Kabbalah ideas that we're going to, before we start, we say, this is, when you hear about Tanya, start with Kuti Amari, Moshayach V'Mona, or Geras HaTshuva for that matter. Even Geras HaKodesh. It's not necessarily the place where, usually it's recommended to start with these Geras, but start with Kuti Amari. But Geras HaKodesh is a little more Kabbalistic, and it's not the regular. Again, it's this Geras HaKodesh Chaf, not the Italian Geras HaKodesh. The Geras HaKodesh Chaf, the 20th epistle, is distinct. Again, it's long. We never had so many classes on one chapter. We're not done. There's still a way to go, quite a way to go, and we look forward, Bez Hashem, continuing and concluding this Geras Chaf as well. So we did have a presentation on Geras HaKodesh. We do mention it in the beginning of the 10th. It has its own backdrop. In the beginning of the 10th, we had a full presentation on the entire Geras HaKodesh. which is 32 epistles of the Alter Rebbe. Alter Rebbe, of course, wrote more, but which made it into the Sefer Tanya Kadisha. So it's in the beginning of 10. It's a click away, namely on the original website, TanyaOnline, one word.com, TanyaOnline.com. Meaning, if you're watching it elsewhere, or even this very class, the original website has the advantage that all the classes are lined up. The ladder on the top, and then you go down from the very beginning, or Kuti Amarim for that matter, and everything is really quick way. For example, you say Igeres HaKodesh, it's a few seconds, I know, or even less. Just the beginning of 10 of Igeres HaKodesh, we had a presentation of the whole backdrop of Igeres HaKodesh, which has its own backdrop. Take a look. And then the advantage of this site that, the Alter Rebbe cross-references, so it's so easy. He says, speaks about an idea. For example, last week we spoke about an idea with Alter Rebbe discusses in Perik Mem Ches, 48th chapter, in the first segment. This is the fourth segment, Igeres HaKodesh, right? There's the Kuti Amorim, Sheikh B'Muna, Igeres HaTshuva, Igeres HaKodesh, and then Kontris Achron. So this is the fourth. For example, last week, the Alter Rebbe speaks about an idea that he mentions, and he also references Lukuti Amorim. He's referring to Lukuti Amorim, the 48th chapter. So 40th chapter, it's a click away. That's the advantage of this particular site. Has also the text is set up on a separate scroll bar, as we mentioned, time and again for that matter. But understandably, for newcomers, it has an advantage because you could follow the class. The text has a separate scroll bar, and as such, easy to follow the class. Again, TanyaOnline.com. And Yeshukach to whoever else. Namely, we do mention periodically the Arut Sheva, and again, Yeshukach, carrying this on a weekly basis. So we're holding on the, yes, like I said, a lot of Kabbalah, but that's what Hashem is called a Chanon. Hashem is gracious, so even He's gracious to us over here that we're able to decipher the Alter Rebbe's message over here, and it becomes yet clearer and yet clearer whenever we chew over the matters which Alter Rebbe is presenting over here. And Hashem sends His Chanina, His grace, in order to give us the opportunity to understand, and Kiyad Hashem Ateva, to ability to give over and to make it clear as much as we can, particularly this Bechlal, but in particular this Igeres HaKodesh. So we were holding the Gam Me'er Sof, which is 2, 4, 6, 7 lines from the bottom of page 262. So what was spoken about the last class? It's a click away. Look at the last class, and you'll see what's spoken about the last class. It's not, we've mentioned, it's not fair to repeat a lot of the previous and take time of the present. But one idea that Alter Rebbe came across was about the idea of Seviv Kolalmin. The idea that the way Hashem has formed himself by himself, which is totally transcendent, that's why it's called Seviv, but it's not a circle. Seviv, he's literally translated, he surrounds all the worlds. It's not a circle, of course not. Because what's in the circle? Hashem's not there. Hashem's everywhere. But it's a transcendent dimension within HaKadosh Baruch Hu that is beyond his slapshus, beyond investment. We gave the example quite a few times, like the generator out of the town, out of the municipality. And that has to be removed because it's such energy there that you'll try to plug your toaster into the generator, it won't work. It'll probably explode. So you have to have the different wirings which condense the energy of the generator and eventually become the outlets to the homes in this city, town, municipality, or any development. And then you take the toaster and put it into the plug, so it's a condensed version, and that's when it'll work and it'll warm up your bread, whatever, and any other device. So someone's going to say, so who needs the generator? If I have the outlet, the generator, my device will explode, but the outlet, it won't. So let's just have the outlet. So who needs a generator? Which is, of course, nonsense, because the reason why your toaster is working is only because the generator. The outlet system took the potent energy which exists in the generator and condensed it. And that's the idea, slapshus. It invests into the area commensurate to the amount of energy you need. In this case, the toaster takes a certain amount of energy. The washer and dryer, as an example, those appliances that we're familiar with, take up more. So it's grander, for example. But where does it all come from? Everything comes from the generator. So the generator is outside it. Seviv, it surrounds. It doesn't come inside these slapshus. It stays outside. It's meant to, because it's not, you cannot use it just like the way it is. It's too powerful. But in the end of the day, everything goes on with all your devices via these wirings. Ending up in your outlet there's only one energy. It's the generator, which is making making it all work. But it stays removed. It ought to stay removed in order that all this should function. Save of Kalam is, of course, it's the Eibishter. Everything is from the Eibishter, but that the Eibishter always forms so by himself has to be removed. That's the idea of Saviv. But again, it's not physically Saviv. He's there, but it has to be. He himself is removed. And then there is from the air and Sabas Saviv, then there is the trickle of light, which comes to be Slapshus, synonymous with, in the example that we give, the energy which comes through the wiring. It's a condensed energy. It's focusing on the need and the amount of energy for which would make these devices ultimately work. And that's what creates, say, the Rishtals of the order of evolution, and beyond that. So in the first part of last week's class, we spoke about that within Ishtalshus, the order of evolution, there's also this seva, this all-encompassing, which would be Odom Kadmein, Seker Skulam Biskira Achas. But it's still part of the Seder Ishtalshus. Again, you have to see the previous classes. Then there's the Eagle Agodol, which is the Eibishter, the Seviv Kalalmin, the way the Eibishter is totally removed from Eilam is Seviv, but removed in a way because the way he's formed so by himself is not involved, overtly involved. Of course, everything comes from him. And Malakalam Sevakalam, it's the same Hashem, the Shchinta and the Kuchabrichu. We spoke about this so many times. The Yichud Kuchabrichu Shchinta is the ultimate purpose, to fuse the two energies of Hashem, this which invests and this which stands transcendent. The fusion of the two is the objective of the Yid through learning Torah and doing mitzvahs, as we spoke about so many times. So here the Alter Rebbe speaks about the Seviv Kol Almin. So then there is no hispashtos, is no hislapshos, because this is less, in one hand, less asar ponimine, but everything is equal, as we spoke about this last week. This was the message towards the end of last week's class, and this is what is spoken about and elaborated on so eloquently in Perik Mem Chesed L'Kuti Amorim. In the first segment, L'Kuti Amorim, the 48th chapter, spoke about the idea in the face of infinity, a million, a billion, a trillion, a quintillion, and one has to be the same. The moment infinity is excited, let's say, about a higher number of a trillion, it looks a bit different towards a billion or a million or 100 or one. It's not really infinite. Because why are you excited with a bigger number, again, metaphorically speaking? True infinity, a million, a trillion, and one is exactly the same. This was the Alter Rebbe. In other words, he has it there. He doesn't say those exactly, but that's the message there. And this is what the Alter Rebbe is saying over here. There is the dimension of Seva Kolam. Even in this physical world. Together with that, of course, it's Seva. So here, today, we start, the Alter Rebbe says, which we spoke about last week, even from this level of the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which surrounds all four Eilamis. Now, he speaks about the four Eilamis, because generically speaking, there's the four Eilamis, Atzilus, B'ri, Yitzir, Asiyah. But there's a few things over here. First of all, higher than Eilam Atzilus is also part of the Seder Ishtalshelus. Now it's higher and higher, Keser, Arichabin, Atikim, and last week we spoke about Adam Kadmin, which is totally an all-encompassing kind. But this is all within the order of evolution. And we must say that we spoke about this whole idea of the Igul HaGodel, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in order to create this Seder Ishtalshelus, which begin in so many different levels. Like I say, even Eilamis, there's infinite amount of Eilamis, as the Alter Rebbe himself writes, in Brat and Kabbalah. But generally we know there's the four, Atzilus, B'ri, Yitzir. So this is all within the Igul HaGodel. Now, it's not fair just to appreciate this message from these words that we were talking about now, because we had a full entire class. I think it was the 7th or 8th. I don't remember, but it's in this chapter which the Alter Rebbe mentions this of the Kav from the Igul HaGodel. It is, I would say it's a 7th, or it should be 7th or 8th class, that everything is Ein Sof, of course. Hashem is everywhere. But anything finite can never stand in the face of infinity. So how does the Eibishter create even Atzilus, which is an Eilam? The Gemara says, Eilam Lashon Helam Behester. It's a concealment of the reality, the unadulterated purity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Ein Sof-ness, the infinite dimension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How do you have an Olam? How does anything finite stand in the face of the infinite? It can't. It's impossible. As we can only appreciate it, even minimally, or minimally investing in this idea of true infinity, which we don't even have no appreciation of by definition, of what true infinity, in other words, or under the circumstances, we're all product of the finite realities which exist within the Seder Ishtalshus, the order of evolution. We cannot, we have the ability as a Yid, because an Neshama comes and is anchored in such a high and deep place within HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So we can tap into that, at least, but not something that we can pinpoint. Yid by Kriyas says, of course, they were so involved, not only involved, they were within the experience of the Ein Sof, so they said Zeh. So usually it's kind of a transcendent type of, which is classically the experience of davening. The way davening is meant to be, that there's a sensation. It's like you're there, and therefore you're experiencing it. Because once you're not experiencing it and you're out of it, so what are you pinpointing on? You're talking about something which is truly infinite. But the sensation of infinity, a person can reach via davening. I say this again, by a healthy davening, particularly through learning Chassidus Chabad and preparing oneself when davening, for good davening, a person could reach the sensation of the Ein Sof of HaKadosh. For how long those 50 minutes he's davening? It could be 50 seconds. But that's stupendous, that's extraordinary, that you tapped in to that, you were there, in that area of the Ein Sof, and that's not only because of you, your merits, which we have to have schusim to climb Miyala Bahar Hashem, as the Pasuk says. But it says, davening Hashem opens up the window from on high. The Rebbe has it, Perikut Beis, Lukuti Amorim, first segment, 12th chapter, 13th chapter, the Eibishter reaches out to connect to the person, give them, and from a certain perspective, based on the explanation there, the presentation there, those chapters, the beginning of Lukuti Amorim, it's the tzaddik experience in the life of the Beni, which is classically by davening. But that's unique, that's special. And it's also, you can't pinpoint, I think I see it. No, you're there or you're not there. And if you're there, you're there. And of course, the entire day after that davening is a different, distinct day, because you were there. And that's what davening is all about. But you can't say, I just see it. When you're already pinpointing and identifying yourself and your finger and saying it's not there anymore. You're in something. Your experience is a transcendent experience. That's what davening is all about. So that's the Ein Sof, but that's when we can tap into it, because we have an Neshama, and an Neshama is anchored in the Ein Sof. Therefore, we can have the connection or that ability to have that sensation of Ein Sof. However, if you're talking about the entire order of evolution, no, Seder Ishtalshus, how could you have a Seder Ishtalshus in the face of the infinite? If Hashem is there and everywhere, and He is Ein Sof, so you cannot have anything which is less than infinite, because how does finite exist in the area of infinite? So HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that was the Tzimtzum Harishain. I feel it's not fair, because we had a whole class on it, which is based on the important study of the Arizal. It seems that he took the Igul Agol, means the entire circle, but it's not like a circle, physical circle. There was a certain area which HaKadosh Baruch Hu removed himself, but not removed himself. Where is Hashem going? There's no domain which is devoid of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He removed the revelation, his revelation. It's like you close the lights. You have a room which just the furniture itself is worth $250,000, as an example. To appreciate it, they have to have the lights open. When the lights closed, you can't appreciate it. To you, it's like to be a dark dungeon. Doesn't mean it's not so stuffy, as an example. It's a beautiful room, and it has nice good ventilation, but when the lights are off, you don't know what's in there. The lights are on, then you can appreciate a beautiful dining room, living room worth $200 million, just the furniture, $200 million. And you see it and you can appreciate it, especially one appreciates nice, beautiful furniture, identifies with it. The lights are off, you can't. But it's not that the lights made this happen. When the lights are on, so that's when the expensive furniture come in. No, they're there the entire time. It's you can see them, and there's no fragmentation within the furniture itself when the lights are off in comparison to when the lights are on. It's exactly the same, exactly to the T. It's just, could you see it? You can't, or you can't see it. And that's what Hashem did in this Igul HaGodol, in this circle, which eventually Seder Shtalshalus would be the beginning of the process of Seder Shtalshalus, the order of evolution. Then eventually Atzilus, B'ri, Yitzir, Asiyah, and we are the rock bottom of the entire Seder Shtalshalus. Ein Tach L'matei Meno. Tell me about it. Tell us about it. I need not to explain. This is rock bottom. That's where Hashem wanted a Dira V'Tachtenim, a dwelling place in this very physical, lowly world. He wanted this. Why did he want it? We don't know, but that's why he's God. And he decided, Nis'abed, it's a type, it's a lust, a covet he had, that this world, which is on the rock bottom, should become an abode for him, for Hashem, Lo Yizbarich, for the core of Hashem, for that matter. But when the entire establishment of Seder Shtalshalus, there was an area where there was a devoid of Hashem, but not devoid of Hashem, that Hashem went somewhere. He left this ego. Hashem doesn't go anywhere. That's where would he go? Like he is everything and he's everywhere. But the point is, he turned off the lights. That's what we gave this example with this dining room. With the difference, the lights are on or off. There's no difference in the substance, in the quality of the furniture or whatever is in the room. It's how much it could be appreciated. And so too, because let's use the word turn off the light, meaning to say the revelation of the infinite was removed. And it remains Igul HaGodol. It's also, it's Visaviv. But again, it's the energy. It's similar to that example we gave with the generator. But there inside, there was a place where the Seder Ishtalshalus could be processed. The order of evolution could be processed. So there was, on the other hand, what is the energy of the order of evolution of Seder Ishtalshalus? Because Baruch removed everything. There has to be energy to create. Of course there has to be. So what Hashem did, in other words, just by removing, that's not enough. It's the first step. Because nothing finite could exist in the face of the infinite. So everything is removed. Okay, now what? Now we want to establish, and wants to establish the Seder Shtalshalus. So there is the kav, that there was a trickle of light, which comes in Seder Shtalshalus, and that creates the entire Seder Shtalshalus, the entire order of evolution. And the higher levels in Aku, which we spoke about so highly. Of course, this is a Kech Seivavin. It's like a kind of is similar to a Seivav type of energy within the order of evolution. It's Odom Kadmain, the primordial Odom, which doesn't exist before the Tzimtzum. And it's all Ein Sof. You can't even give it a particular description, but it's it's an all-encompassing Kayach. And that's all within the Seder Shtalshalus. You can imagine the enormous Kayach of the Kav, of this trickle of light, and we can only appreciate why it has all this enormous Kayach, because it's coming from, it's Davuk in the Ein Sof. It's a trickle of light coming from the top of the Gilgal, which there everything is Ein Sof. So even a little Ein Sof, a fraction of infinity is also infinite. Does it carry the potent energy of the infinity of the ways before the Tzimtzum, before this condensement, this contraction? Of course not. It's a trickle of light, but nonetheless, you can imagine the kayach of this trickle of light that creates the entire Seder Shtalshalus, all the highest levels. And then Kesed, the two levels of Kesed we said before. There's no, even Eilamis, it says there's Bligvul, infinite amount of Eilamis. And then begins Atzilus, which Atzilus is a very holy world. We spoke about it so many times. Atzilus is a world that houses the Ein Sof. So on one hand, it's a paradox. On one hand, the whole phenomenon of Atzilus, it's an Eilam. Eilam Elashon Helam V'Hester conceals over the true and purity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Conversely, it's a world which houses the Ein Sof. Chesed Atzilus is a certain Bligvulness to it, infinite energy of Chesed, but then still Midois measurement. Chesed is not Gvura, Gvura is not Chesed, but there has a certain, because Koyach Ein Sofi, because Atzilus Leigur Chara. We spoke about this so many times. Even Bria, that's where Gan Eden Elyon is, but Bria is Be'ein Arayich. There's no comparison, Bria to Elam Atzilus. Bria is already creation, while Atzilus is still emanation of Hashem. And then Yitziri, Asiya, and then Asiya Gashmis. So all this comes from the Kav. You can imagine the enormous, and then there's Machus Kol Yolam, there's an infinite amount of worlds. It's just, the formal. But even the formal, you can imagine the enormous Kayach the Kav has in. Why shouldn't it? It's coming. It's Davuk in the Ein Sof. Nogabay, in other words, Lashon in Kabbalah, in Al-Rizal, that it's connected to the Ein Sof, Shalifni HaTzimtzum. That's why it has so much Kayach. So here the Alter Rebbe speaks about the Kav again. Again, you have to see, I think it was the 7th class where we spoke about this in length. Ein Sof, the Gami Ein Sof. Okay, we're going to start this again. The 7th line from the bottom of 262 in the original text, from the infinite light of and here the Alter Rebbe focuses on the Eilamis, the worlds which surround the 4 world B'Shava, equally. Like we mentioned before, true infinity, in the face of true infinity, Atzilus and Asiya, and whatever is in Eilam Asiya has to be equal, because the moment Atzilus, the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in this case, in other words, in the Nimshul, in the message, is excited about the Atzilus as an example, and of course, there's a lot to be excited about Atzilus, and the Ein Sof, this is where I'm, this is where it's my, this is where this is my ambiance, my environment. But I don't know. Asiya, Elam Hazar Gashmi. I'm reluctantly pulling along. No, because from the in perspective of the Ein Sof, Abya B'Shava, because that's what true infinity is. Like we mentioned, if infinity is excited about quintillion more than 100 or more than 1, it's just not truly infinite. So that's what Alter Rebbe underscores B'Shava. This Seva Makal Arbal Mem is, of course, B'Shava. Equally, Atzilus and Elam Asiya Gashmi is equal in that. So that's what Sovev is all about. That's the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the way Hashem has formed himself by himself. Sovev Kol Almin, removed completely. But that shines into Kav HaPnimi, Derech HaKev Yitzvir is the B'Yav. As we said before, it goes through the Kav. And the Kav goes through the Kelim of the 10 Sviris of Bri Yitzir Asiya. And why is it connected directly to the Kelim of Bri Yitzir Asiya? And the simple idea is because this is the ultimate purpose. There should be the defining, the ability to define matters over its spiritual dimension, which is transcendent of any type of definition and matter. Bria, Yitzira, Asiya, Olam Hazar Gashmi, where the ultimate purpose of all of creation is. That, of course, comes through Kelim. We know that in every Olam there's Iris and Kelim. Iris are the transcendent dimension of that very Olam. Of course, in the Iris, always connected to a higher level, it says, Iyu b'chayayichad, Iyu b'garmayichad, Hashem and His light are one. It doesn't say Iyu b'chayayichad, Hashem and His light and His Kelim are one. It divides. It compartmentalizes the union of the Iris with Hashem and the Kelim with Hashem. Of course, Iris is transcendent. That's what Iris is all about. But the Kelim, despite they're in a total different level, and therefore the unity of Kelim and Hashem are totally different and much less than the union of the Eiros of the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of course. But the Kelim is what establishes the nitty-gritty of Seder Shtalshus. That's the part over here. Because the Kelim is where the ultimate, the evolution to the ultimate, which is Elam Hasiyah Gashmis, would come about. And therefore, when it shines to the Kava Pnimi, it goes through the Kelim of Yitzvir, I'm particularly talking about the Pnimius. The message of the Kav is to create, and what is underscored in creation and making things happen is, of course, the Kelim, the containers, which they establish this formation of every single Elam, even Elam of Atzilut, but particularly the Biyah, because that's what ultimately would establish this formation of Elam Asiyah Gashmis, which the ultimate purpose exists within. So the Kav, that's what he says, so the trickle of light comes from that Ein Sof. As we explained in that class, and again, briefly presented this over here, that the Kav comes from the Ein Sof, the Eagle Hagadol, as it's known, and it comes into the Kav HaPnimi through the Kelim of Yitzvir Zebiyah. When it comes and it connects via and within the Kelim, it gives that strength and energy to create in a manner of ex nihilo. As we mentioned, the different ways of Hashem's creation or emanation, or the type of evolvement from the higher to the lower and establishing a lower phenomenon. One of them was the Ilava Ol, the cause and effect, but we said the Olo is always so close to the Elo, and that would never create, certainly not Elam Hazak Gashmi the way we know it. And therefore, the Eibushter introduces this ex nihilo program, and we spoke about this so much, we're not going to elaborate over here, that the idea that on one hand, everything is truly bottled to, it's completely submissive or subordinate to its kind, but it doesn't have anything. We mentioned, we always use that stone on top of the mountain. The stone has nothing else, which makes it exist other than the Dvar Hashem, Amahava, Machai, Mekayim, the word of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives it life and existence constantly. Every day, every moment, every second, every millisecond, Hashem is giving life to that stone, and if Hashem pulls back the life of that stone, not only the stone will break apart, decay or whatever, it will disappear. So the whole mitzias of the stone, even you see it's messageless, it doesn't carry a message, it's lifeless, but in the end of the day, its whole mitzias is elokus. And the reason why it doesn't give off a message or doesn't protest the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is giving its life and existence every single second, is because it's part of the Yesh Mi Ayin program that HaKadosh Baruch Hu creates something from nothing, ex nihilo, that the Yesh, the Ayin, is not evident in the Yesh. And of course, it's enormous kayach to do so. Ilah v'olah makes more sense. But to create something, to be and not to be simultaneous, but literally, to have everything of creation dependent on the chayis of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and then creation doesn't protest that, doesn't demonstrate it, and for that matter, just the opposite. As we know, by default, any mafsiyah, like the Alter Rebbe writes in Lamed Vav, L'kuti Amorim, famous, we mentioned it so many times. Very, very important chapters, even though for that matter, every chapter in Tanya is very important, but the flow, the explanation of Dira V'Tachteim, this great message of HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanting a domicile in this very world, physical world, the whole explanation begins. Lamed Hey, Lamed Vav. But one of the things Alter Rebbe's Lamed Vav not only doesn't demonstrate the oneness of Hashem, which is its true reality, to the opposite. Ani v'afsiyai. No, don't talk to me about Hashem. Pari says, Ani Eidu v'Yesesani. Pari exemplified that idea. I'm the Nile and I made it. No, you made nothing. Pari, you made nothing. And the fact that you're talking now is because Hashem right now is giving you life and energy to be, to exist, to talk, to fight, to be stubborn, and so on and so forth. Even though part of it is his choice, but again, not going to go into it right now. But that's what Yesh Mi Ayin is. And this is only Yesh Mi Ayin, but Yesh Mi Ayin is famous as only in the bosom of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. No one could create something from nothing, and in such a manner that creates something from nothing also doesn't exist in creation. It's only the creator can do so. And simultaneously, this what you create, which is totally dependent 100% on the creating force and energy, should not protest it, demonstrate it, as if it's a separate entity. Yesh. That is mind-boggling. And that's B'chei Kabayri. That is the only one who has power to do so is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And more so, this B'rei Yesh Mi Ayin, if you remember, the Alter Rebbe writes this, and he says this is enormous power. When you say B'chei Kabayri, not only the way the Eibushter is created to Bayre Bria, but that's in the bosom of the master of the world, the infinite Koyach of HaKadosh Baruch Hu could create Yesh Mi Ayin, and more so the Alter Rebbe writes that this is connected to the Etzem, the core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in the lessons on this very chapter, the information in this very chapter. And that's why there's also a connection from the Kab, which is Davik and the Ein Sof, coming through the Kalim, because that's what gives it the Koyach Va'oz to be that grand, to be the facilitator of the expression, the manifestation of this special, unique program of creation of Yesh Mi Ayin, of Ex Nihilo, which is extraordinary, supernatural. From our perspective, it's kind of impossible, but yeah, that impossibility is associated, that bringing that impossible, making this impossible possible, associated with the Ein Sof. Shalifne Hatzimtzum, because you're dealing with true infinity and there's never any limitation when you're talking about the infinite. So that is the koyach to create Yesh Mi Ayin. So that's also the connection to the Kalim. Additionally, what we said before, the Kalim is in the end that they would bring the Oilimus into being, and eventually the ability that this world could be created in order that the Yid can come and fulfill the mission, his or her mission, and bringing about the grander message and the grander scheme of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to make this world a dwelling place for Hashem. And that comes through the Kelim, as we spoke about before. But beyond that, the Kelim is would carry that specially Yesh Mi'ayin, that Koyach which comes with the Ein Sof. So we see right away the connection of the Ein Sof with the Kelim. Because the Kelim is what brings about and this phenomenon of Yesh Mi'ayin, as we spoke about in the last few classes. And that has to come from Koyach Ein Seifi. So that's why when Alter Rebbe speaks about the Kav, whoa, he rushes down to the Kelim, not even the Kelim of Atzilus. Kelim of Yud Tzvid is the Biyah, the B'riyah Tziyasir. But when V'harasa Techa Kelim, like he says, it gives it the Koyach and Eiz, the strength to create Yesh Mi'ayin. Here the Alter Rebbe goes on, because creation comes through Kelim, we'll stop over here with the text. Without ever say, that's why it makes sense that we can identify, even in this world, the multiplicity. Multiplicity only comes through Kelim. As we can appreciate it in a simple Kelim, a container. So when the water, let's say, is pouring from all sides, it's one level, one water pour. You don't see any divide. It's just pouring. It's a dam. It's pouring. When you put a kelim, so there's this kelim, and then you fill up this kelim, put another one, and different types of kelim. The bottle, the cup. These differences come because of the container, not because what is coming into the container. Particularly when you talk about oil, light. More there you see the oneness, particularly as it says, Kabbalah, Chassidus. It is davuk in the Moed, in the illuminator. So the kelim, that begins the divisiveness. So therefore, because the B'riyah comes through kelim, therefore you have the multitude, and the divide, and limitation, and border through the kelim. And particularly through the Aisiyas, the letters. How many letters, how many combinations could you make out of 6 letters? You ever thought about it? Like the telephone numbers, they're 7 digits, and you have tens of thousands, maybe have with the different combinations establish their own particular phone number, and again multiple tens of thousands from that very amount of digits, and of course so much more when you add more digits. The postal code, the zip code, the postal code, the zip code is an example. The postal code, or we call the phone code, because even 7, there's a limitation of just how much there is. How many combinations could you make from 7? So you have every city as an example, or different areas have different, because you need more to establish more combination, understandably. So, but in the end of the day, you're dealing 10 or 7. This is a quick example. So too, when you talk about the Isis of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, from 6, the Gemara says, it says in Sefer Yetzirah, how many combinations can you do from 2, 1, 2, or rather 2, and 3, and 4, and 5, and then when you're talking about, say, 20, there's 22 letters. Take the 22 letters, how many combinations could you make from the 22 letters? We can't imagine, we can't wrap our minds around it, because especially when you use the same letters yet again and again, it's not that you're only using them once. The combination has to be distinct, so you can use the same letters again. I don't even think that we could even have the exact number. How many combinations could be established through the 22 letters? And for that matter, 22 Isis in Lashon HaKodesh. In another languages also, it's just that, of course, the difference how they come together, they're pronounced. But in the overall, you pretty much have the same 22 expressions of the Isis, which are usually divided. Again, in the Hey Meitzis Apeh, we spoke about it in the past, based on the 5 instruments, which different letters come and pronounce from. So the Isis are a part of this creation. And say Isis begin in Malchus, just like by the human being. Malchus, it says in Pasach Leo is the Peh, it's the Kech of Dibur. That's where we realize, so Isis really begin in Machshava. We think it's in language as well, but there it's more subtle. You can see this in the end of Chaf in Lakuti Amarim. Until it speaks about, yes, there's Isis the way we think also. Letters, Deeper than the machshava, there's no ACS at all in sensation of the heart. There's no letters. It's a pure. It's a non-limited type. In other words, there's no container. It's a sensation, particularly when you have something in your seichel. There's no ACS. ACS begin in thought, even though the machshava itself will combine with a chachma. There would be dibur, which would combine with the sensation of the heart. So it puts a certain way of expressing one's sensation of one's heart. Usually it comes through speech. You have compassion on something, so you say, I have so much compassion, and you talk words of compassion. And take some food and make yourself comfortable, and if you need to lodge, and how else can I help you, and I sympathize with you. And you're taking the words, which that's where the ICs are, and you're attaching it to that sensation of the heart, and that both of them together have that expression, a noble expression. But ICs begin on their own, not the sensation itself doesn't have any ICs. You're meant to put certain words, especially in the context of the mitzvah tzedakah, or identify, sympathize with another yid, which is again mandated by Torah or another human being for that matter. But the sensation itself doesn't have any structure. It has structure, but doesn't have any ICS letter. Letters begin in the machshava, in thought. And then eventually, where do they become truly structured, that you can hear the 22 alphabet, or l'havdil of those 22 letters of Aleph as an example? There it's in dibur, in speech. Dibur corresponds to Malchus. Malchuscha, Malchus Kalilam. And why do you have the multitude of elements and so many Nivraim? Is because it's coming from Malchus. Malchus corresponds to Dibur, where you have the stark Isis, the 22 Isis with the different combinations, which establish different type of Nivraim. And that you have to see in Shaykh B'Emunah. The first chapter, and go on. This is the second segment of Sefer Tanya. It's the first chapter. And you go on, you'll see it towards the end also. Yud Aleph, Yud Beis. The idea how the letters create different types of creations, but it's already in the first chapter of Tanya. It's a click away in this site. So it's the first chapter, and then again you have to appreciate its message, to learn everything. But the end, Yud Aleph, Yud Beis, without speaks about how the combination of different letters create different creations, different beings, different created beings, as an example. So just like we have multitude in Isis, which is associated with Malchus, so this energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when it comes to Kelim, and particularly, and Kelim really exists in every one of the spheres. Chesed, there's Eira Chesed and Kliya Chesed. Kliya Chesed is already, there is multitude of division. The Kliya Chesed is distinct from the Kliya Gvura, and Gvura from Tiferes, and Tiferes from Netzach, and so on. But Isis exists in Malchus, similar to the Dibur. There is where Isis come out stark. Again, they're in the Machshava, but namely in Dibur. So there's such multitude of Isis, especially in its combination. So that's the reason why you have the Ribu Yischalkos, this multitude in all elements. Even in this world, we don't even know how many of every species example there exists. We have a better idea now than we had 100 years ago. And we just cut numbers which are astronomic. And this is all created by design, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted a world that there should be ribui, multitude, yischalkos, division, border, measurement, and here we should bring about the message of Hashem Echad, to point out that in the end of the day it's all part of the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Even this divisiveness which we see, this is what Hashem's plan was, to take something which is Rishus HaRabim, as Alter Rebbe has the Lashon, towards the end of Lamed Gimel as an example, the 33rd chapter of Likutei Amorim. You take the Tura de Pru, the Rishus HaRabim, the domain of the multitude. Halacha, the Rabbim, the many are the outer, than the Rishus HaYachid, the domain of the private, the individual. Hashem wants us to take this Rishus HaRabim, where there is multiplicity and divisiveness, and introduce the Hashem Echad there. And for that matter, it's already hinted in the Hashem Echad, Aleph, the message to take the Luf Shalom and imbue it and infuse it together with the Ches, the seven heavens and the earth, and the Daled Ruchos Ha'olam, the four corners of the world. Four sides of the world, it should all be demonstrate that everything is, in the end of the day, part of the oneness of Hashem. So Hashem wants us to take this Rishus HaRabim and transform it into Rishus HaYachid, Li Shel Olam, to that one master of the entire world. And the point is to take the divisiveness, the divide, the multiplicity which exists, which is the ultimate part of Dirba Tachtenim, establishing a Kodesh Baruch Hu, a domain where you don't see that oneness, namely the oneness of Hashem. You do see the multiplicity and the divide, the divisedness, and that's where Hashem wants us to introduce the Emes Hashem to Eilam, like the pasuk says, to make this world of Rishus Harabim, of the multitude, and connect it to the Yachid, to Hashem, to the oneness of HaKadosh, that everything should demonstrate that I am part of the oneness of HaKadosh, and there it is, and that you cannot separate me from that oneness. It's the oneness wanted things to appear separate, but it's not that they're truly intrinsically separate, and separate sources. Yeah, but it's like the organs. It's like the human being. There is so many ways a person expresses himself, but it's part of one organism. It's one human being, which wants to walk and write and so on. And this is what Hashem wanted. There should be multiplicity, and in the multiplicity we should megala Hashem Echad, the one is multiplicity. So what causes multiplicity? Is that Ein Sof connecting with the Kelim, which carry the message or have the ability to bring to fruition, to manifestation, this koyach, which is in extraordinary koyach, which is the koyach of Bria Yesh Miyayin, ex nihilo. And then the idea that you see the multitude when it comes to Kelim, but how much more so when it comes to Isis letters, as we just explained, especially I don't know, you could say infinite, maybe it's a amount of the combinations. But there you have the Chalkus comes precisely through Isis, like we mentioned before. And in there, not to forget the mission, this is where things come to being. But why do they come to being? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted, and again, we'll conclude the class with this, we should never forget the idea, why should there be Ribui? Why should there be Chalkus? Why should there be Gvul? Why should there be the Gvul Tachlis? Why should there be such multitude and multiplicity, which comes enormously grander and greater, and be'ein areich through the Isis? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted that we should bring about the oneness, the unity of Hashem, le'olam, into this world, the world of Helam Hester, a world where there is Rabim, the multitude. We should introduce the Hashem Echad, that the world becomes a Reshus HaYachid, a domain, the Yichid Shalom for HaKadosh Baruch Hu.